We worked together for a number of years, and we have been friends for 25 years. And I consider her my Florida family. She was in New York City on 9/11. Actually, I was one of those people who was watching live as the second plane hit. And it didn't hit me right away, but it hit me a couple of hours later that she and I had been in San Francisco the week before. She was heading to Cleveland for a family wedding. And then I remembered that she was heading to New York. So I quickly called her husband and I said, please tell me she's not in the middle of all this. And he said, oh yeah, she's right in the middle of it. She's safe, she's on her way home. But that was sort of frightening. I think 9/11 is one of those events that has had a huge impact on so many people and a huge impact on our culture. When I think about 9/11, I think it's kind of one of the last major events that so many of us have a shared memory of. You know, there's so many events in history, but I think 9/11 might be the one for all of us in this class that we have that shared memory. We know what we were doing. We remember things that happened on that day. It received huge media coverage, and it still does every year on the anniversary of 9/11. So I see that there's a major connection between 9/11 as a cultural event and media, which is our other main topic, which is one of the reasons I thought I would ask Heather to speak to this class. You know, other than the Super Bowl and the Olympics, I think that's the last thing we kind of watched together was what happened on 9/11. And as I said, some of us saw the second plane hit. Many of us were glued to our TVs and wound up seeing when the towers came down. So her story is, I think, a wonderful one. I've heard her tell it before. And I thought that this class, it was worth having her join us. So let me put up her slides.
Audrey, are you going to record?
It's already recording.
Great, thank you.
Oh, and I see that Mac is trying to get in now. Okay, so we've got full screen. So you can see Heather's slides. And Heather, I'm just gonna turn it over to you.
Okay, great, thank you, Audrey. Thank you for the introduction, and I'm getting feedback somehow. Is anybody else hearing that? I'm hearing an echo.
I'm not.
Okay, then I'll just keep going and ignore it. But thank you for the introduction. Thank you for letting me be here today. It's very interesting. Audrey and I agreed to me coming to speak to this class before there was a coronavirus about this topic. So I find it very interesting that I am speaking to you this evening when our world has changed drastically in the last few weeks. And I've heard people say that the impact of the coronavirus is like 9/11, the recession and crash of 2009, and Hurricane Irma for us Floridians all combined. So I find it very ironic that I'm going to be here today talking to you about 9/11, and I think we are experiencing, I know we are experiencing one of these events, an even more impactful event together at this time, where we will be watching things together and seeing the impact already of the media on that. So another thing I wanted to say in the introduction is Audrey and I were chatting about how this connects with the impact of media, and she was telling me again her experience, and my experience is so very different. And I have to admit, I didn't have, I mean, I had some interaction with the media that you'll hear in this story, but I suffered significant post-traumatic stress disorder after the event, and that's part of my message I share. So I don't remember, and one of the things Audrey said in a note to me was that advertisements stopped, and I don't remember that at all. It was more than, well, I saw one address on TV when we stopped to take a break on our way back, but I'll tell you about. But after that, I don't remember watching any TV until about midway through that weekend afterwards. So, so it didn't impact me the way it did many others. It's just kind of another thing that I still pull from. But anyway, I absolutely love coming and addressing students of any size. I talk to usually like middle school age on up. I did an address on 9/11 at a middle school this year. I've talked to many high schoolers about my experience. I love to speak to college level. And I also have a personal interest in coaching and mentoring. So whenever Audrey asks me to come speak to a class, I say yes. I really enjoy being able to do that. And what I'm going to start with, do I have control to change this?
Probably not.
Okay, so if you can go to the next slide, what I'll start with is just an introduction and let you know a little bit about me for context, and context for just who I am, and then context for this story that I'm going to share with you today. But I absolutely love sharing my story and my insights into how to be successful in life as a parent, a spouse, a mother, a daughter, a sister, as well as then a career executive. I've spent 30 years in the human capital industry that I'll talk about. So I absolutely love sharing my story with others who have similar passions and ambitions as I do. So personal introduction, I live in Tampa. I came to Tampa from Cleveland, Ohio, just shortly before Audrey moved here. I grew up, was born and raised in a very small town in northern Michigan. But I got transferred to Cleveland after working in Detroit for several years, and stayed in Cleveland for a little bit, met and married the love of my life, and got an opportunity I could not turn down to come to Tampa, Florida, and we've been here since 1994. I'm the mother of 2 children adopted from China, which plays into my story a little bit that I'm going to be sharing with you. Kennedy is a junior at University of Florida. Quincy is a senior at Plant High School and will be going to Florida State this summer, we hope. I have recovered from 9/11. I'm going to talk about that in a minute of what that took. But I have traveled across the world since then, and I put together on this introduction a few pictures of my travels. Down to the bottom right is a picture of me at the Eiffel Tower with my colleagues. Up at the top right is a picture of me at the Taj Mahal, which was taken just one day after September 11th, 2017. Down below is a picture of me and my daughter Quincy and me in New York at 30 Rock. And proof that New York City is still my very favorite place to be in the world. And I go to places that are kind of scary to go when you think about what I've been through. And so I thought putting that picture of 30 Rock was telling. My very last trip that I treasure is the one up above to the left with my daughter and I in Berlin, another major place that was impacted, a cultural impact and a media impact for sure, what happened there when the wall came down and everything before it. And I've always wanted to visit Berlin, and I had the opportunity to do so in August, and it was incredibly memorable. So I, as a professional, I have dedicated most of my entire career to human capital. So human capital is defined as the people side of the business, and focusing on employees from acquiring employees to hiring, developing them, succeeding, and taking them through that whole employee life cycle to retirement. Most of my career has been spent in learning and development. I've been a professional trainer, and then I moved into sales and I became a sales executive. I've led professional services delivery for a while. I've led alliance networks, channel sales, global sales, and most recently built a worldwide sales team at Deloitte for a company called Burson. I would ask you to jot this down. If you don't know Josh Burson, I'd highly suggest it. He's somebody to follow. He's posting some amazing things right now about our current times and situation. I love everything he writes. So I had a wonderful career for 6 years getting to work side by side. And now I've decided to take a role here close to home. So I'm Chief Revenue Officer now at a local company called the Omnia Group, and we focus on helping organizations improve their talent selection. And so we help them assess the capabilities of their folks as well as their personalities for job fit, as well as develop internal mobility and cross hiring for roles. So I just started that role in February. So I'm in a brand new career, and it's a very interesting time to be starting a brand new job at a brand new place. So that's who I am. If you go to the next slide, I'll start to switch now to my story. I like to share this, and like I said, I share this story, and this is pretty much the same spiel I give to everybody. So, and I do this in a manner of sharing my own experience of 9/11, which I do like to share with people because I think it's important to hear from people who were there. It's one of the things I enjoyed about visiting Berlin is hearing firsthand accounts of people who grew up on both sides of the wall and what it was like then. And I have a personal account of what happened in New York, and I like to talk about it. But I also think it's a story of resilience and how we get through tough times and how I personally got through tough time. And like I said, I did suffer PTSD. Frankly, I'm shaky today after the news and everything that's going on. It still affects me sometimes when things, it's a trigger event. And if anybody here or listening has suffered that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I'm going to talk you through a little bit of my coping skills before I tell you the story. So when you're suffering personal tragedy, my minister who helped counsel me through my healing shared with me quickly that it didn't have to define who I was. And yet, if you go to the next bullet, this is a build, Audrey, just it should shape you. So if you keep going with that, it should shape you, but it shouldn't necessarily be the determinant for the rest of your life. And again, I think that's the time we're in right now as well. This experience is going to shape us, but it should not define our destiny. And then the next bullet is how do you get through it? And I think of the 3 F's and the 3 T's. And my 3 F's are my faith, my family, and my friends. And I coined a phrase from my grandma, Iva Crampton, who lived to a dear age of 95, who always said to me, my dear one, it always takes the 3 T's to get through anything tough. And that's time, it takes talking about it, and it takes tears. And that's definitely my story. It took all 6 of those things to get me through it and to be able to speak to you about this today. So I offer that up as whatever's happening in your life or has happened to you or what we're going through now, I truly stand before us and believe it's going to take these 6 things to get through what we're going through. So let me shift to my story of what happened. This is a picture of where I was on the morning of 9/11. As Audrey said, I was on a record travel, what do I want to say? I was traveling nonstop at the time. And I actually had fulfilled one of my dreams. I had wanted to be a speaker at this conference, this industry conference that I'd been an attendee at. And Audrey and I were in San Francisco, and I had achieved that dream. I was a speaker at a session. I was on a high. And then I flew to Cleveland for a wedding and was with all my family. My husband had flown in with our 2-year-old daughter at the time for the wedding. And then I was literally leaving for New York to go to the city and to speak and to help run an event we were having. We were having a day-long internal meeting with our colleagues first, and then the next day there was a meeting to take place at the World Trade Center. At the wedding brunch, the day after the wedding, I had shared with people where I was going. My husband's from a big Irish Catholic family. There were like 500 people at the wedding. And unusually, everybody for the first time knew exactly where I was going, which was interesting because usually people don't know where I'm at in that big of a family. And I'd shared that I was going to New York. I would love New York. I was really excited, but I wasn't happy that I was having to stay in downtown in the financial district. I said, I don't like going there. I don't like the hotel I'm staying at. That's the hotel where they drove that van in, and there was a bombing a few years ago. And I expressed my shakiness at being there. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see a picture of the proximity to the World Trade Center. So I was literally 2 buildings away from it. But the World Trade Center takes up a major block. And if you go out the back of that hotel, by where we were meeting, it literally crosses the alley into into one of the towers. So we were, one of my dear friends that I was at the meeting with, we were a very close-knit company, as you can probably gather, because Audrey worked there too, and that's how we began our friendship. We all admitted that we just really didn't like where we were, and we were shaky. So interestingly enough, when the meeting started the morning of 9/11, it was an absolutely gorgeous day. There wasn't a cloud in the sky, perfectly blue. And the meeting started at 8:30. And we had a speaker coming, and he was talking to us about workplace violence. and they had a learning and development program to talk to you about workplace violence and what you could do if it happened to you. And frankly, we were all shaking our heads like, is this relevant? Why are we spending our time doing this? We've never been hit by it. And so it was very bizarre when the events unfolded as they did. So I'll go to the next slide and walk you through the steps of how it unfolded. So if you push the first one down, it was 8 o'clock. Okay, I had the timing wrong. That's why I like to have my timeline here, because we all jotted down this timeline afterwards to corroborate our memory of the event. So the meeting kicked off at about 8. We were going through it. We actually were going to be working through some difficult things that day. We had some conflict on the team. We were implementing a new strategy around our global sales process. So there was some tension in the room, and it was a very interesting kickoff to the meeting. And like I said, we were all settling into this topic of workplace violence and our guest speaker. And so at 8:46, if you go to the next bullet, Audrey, there was this thunderous explosion, and that's when American Airlines Flight 11 hit the North Tower. We heard the immediate impact of the plane hitting the building. Our building shook, and what it sounded like was that something had fallen off the building. Like, we first thought maybe it was scaffolding or a piece of construction, and interestingly enough, the hotel was under construction. People had been woken the night before with noise, and there were complaints about that. And like I said, people were kind of on edge anyway. So we just chalked it off to the construction, but then we heard a lot of noise on the street. So we ran to the window, and we were in a conference room on the second floor, just above street level. And the conference room was let me make sure I get this right now, 2 sides glass. So glass to that alley that I told you about, and then glass to the street. And then there was 2 interior walls. But that's kind of important to the story. So we all went to the window, and we started looking up and looking down. And what we noticed first is there was pink stuff falling from the sky. I mean, big pieces of pink stuff. I don't know how that's what we called it. And we thought, well, maybe it's insulation. Maybe, again, there's construction up above and insulation is falling. And for those of us who've seen insulation, you know what I'm talking about. But then we started noticing things on the street, and right in front of us down below. And I mean, this is just a story up. I'm sitting in my upstairs room right now looking down, and it's about a story above. There was a car stopped right below the window, and there was a big chunk of metal that was the size of the roof of the car on top of it. And the people in the car were looking up and screaming and shouting, and they were just like not sure what to do, but they couldn't get out of their car. And then we started looking in the street and saw what looked like meat in the streets. And I don't know who said it. We said it looks like a meat truck lost its load, which is just disgusting to say now as you think about it. But that's what we were trying to piece together. There's like pink stuff falling out of the sky. Now it looks like meat on the street. And then people started saying, oh my God, that's a leg. It's an arm. Those are parts of the body. And I think, and immediately what I remember is we all just jumped away from the window in horror and didn't want to look. And we didn't. We just immediately went, holy cow, there's something going on. So I'll pause the story because probably 2 years before that, I had been in Las Vegas with Audrey at a conference, and there was an earthquake in the middle of the night. And we woke up. I've never been in an earthquake, but there was an earthquake in Las Vegas. I think it was on the 5s, so it was enough. And we were up on the very high floors of the building, and we awoke to shaking. And my roommate and I freaked out and ran down, I think, 22 flights of stairs, and freaked out. And then everybody downstairs said, you got to get back up to your hotel room. You're safer there, which we didn't like hearing. But we did. We ran back up to our hotel room, and we turned on CNN, and CNN was already reporting the earthquake. So I remembered that when this was happening, and I thought, this is big enough. I mean, there are bodies all over the street below. Something's going on. Let's go get to a TV. So if you go to the next bullet, what we did is we went up to room 601. We turned on the TV and we started calling our families. Now we left everything in the conference room. The only thing I grabbed was my purse and my cell phone. So we got up to the room and we turned on the TV and saw the reporting was happening, that they were reporting that a small plane had hit the building was what we heard. And so I called my husband and I said, you know, something's happened. He was on his way to take our daughter to daycare or to her preschool. And so he said, oh my gosh, okay. I said, just turn on the TV and stay put. I think this is kind of major. I'm okay. We're trying to figure it out. I'll call you later. So we all just hunkered down and started watching the news. And as we were doing that, you go to the next bullet, we were watching the news and we thought it was a replay of the plane coming in, and it was the second plane hitting the building. And this time it was the tower closer to us. And I mean, it was like the earthquake, except for it went ba-boom, like not a rocking, but it was a complete shudder. It felt like a direct impact, you know, head on, intentional, and it was when we knew we're under attack. Like there is something significant going on. So we ran like heck down the stairs, not the elevator. Next bullet, Audrey. And we went to the hotel lobby and we made sure we had everybody. There were 9 of us. And we started planning our escape. And we knew we had to get out of there and we weren't going to mess around. It was like this, I can tell you, it was flight. It was flight mode. You know, they say fight or flight. We were going to flight. We were getting out of there and we weren't going to be held back. Interestingly enough, in the hotel, they weren't letting people out on the street. They were immediately serving, they were walking around with trays with juice and crackers and saying, you need to stay here, you're safer here. And in the meantime, they had already set up triage and were bringing people in off from the streets, and there were emergency people on hand to bandage and take care of people. But again, we were like, we're not staying, there's no way. And so as we collected our group, we all decided we were getting out of there. And we were only blocks away from Battery Park where there is water. And what we all decided to do was the best thing was to get near water, because if there was fire or more attacks, maybe we'd be safe by jumping in the water. I like to insert some funny things along this story because it's a hard one. I am scared to death of water. I don't like to swim, but yet my feeling was I can jump in that water and my life will be saved, or at least elongated for a bit until we figure it out. So it's kind of a bizarre thought we had, but it seemed like the best form of safety at the time. So, and it did turn out to be. So once we collected everybody, we escaped. We went out the back. Interestingly enough, we went by our conference room where we had just been meeting. And when that second plane hit, or maybe by the fuselage and all the plane debris or whatever that fell down, the entire glass had been shattered and come in. So that room was disheveled, and we probably would have been very damaged by shards of that glass. They were in big pieces. So it was quite impactful to see that. We left everything. We left our suitcases upstairs. We left all of our stuff in the conference room and just were focused on getting out and getting down to Battery Park. We had to step over pieces of the plane. There was one big piece we had to jump over. We think it was the plane. It was a big piece of something that looked like, again, in our view, some form of equipment that was part of something. So who knows, it could have been cranes or whatever, but our memory was that it was pieces of the plane. So if you go to the next bullet, we walked single file line down to Battery Park, and we got to Battery Park and it was just kind of mayhem. And our group was still stunned, trying to figure out what to do. So we agreed, if something else happened, we agreed to a meeting place, which if you've been down to Battery Park, there's that fort. It's like a circular wall. I might have a picture of it later in the presentation, but there's a circular wall. And so everybody agreed we would go by water and maybe try and call family again and then get our wits about us. And if something happened, we would all just meet at that place and then try to decide what our plan B was. After we all bought water, there were street vendors doing that, and we thought, well, we better take care of ourselves that way, not knowing what else was coming. We were hearing rumors of other attacks. People were just, talking to each other and trying to figure out what was going on. And at that point, our group got into a little bit of a disagreement about what we should do. This is the team building part of the message I usually give when we're talking about team dynamics. But we definitely did assign a leader of our group and did some of our group dynamics. Our company actually taught team building. So we used some of our own skills to get through it, but we had to agree and build consensus that we were going to stick to our plan. But 2 on our team wanted to go uptown. Somebody had a cousin there who thought we could go stay with their cousin if we couldn't get off. And the rest of us were like, no, we think we can get a boat. We saw the ferries and we were pretty sure we could get on a ferry and get out. And that's what we were going to do. So we called our travel department. We arranged for rental cars at a hotel in southern New Jersey that somebody had just stayed at. And we remembered they had a rental car place. We thought, if we can get across the water, hitchhike, and we'll get a rental car down the road. That's what our plan was. And thank goodness we were thinking of that constantly. And we had a travel department that we called. And of course, everybody was happy at work to hear from us because they all knew we were there. So I will tell you, though, that at this point, it was 3 hours before I was able to get back to my husband. It wasn't long after this that cell phone signals just went down. There was no way because everybody was trying to connect. Plus, there were probably damage to who knows what that controls cell phones. So we weren't able to do anything. But as this was all going on and we were trying to figure out our plan and what we were doing, that was when the South Tower collapsed. And when that happened, it was literally the first time that we were scared for our lives. That noise and sound and everything else that came with it is something that I will hear and remember for the rest of my life. It was like an earthquake. When the buildings came, if you haven't, I'm sure you've seen the video or you watched it on TV if you were old enough. That cloud just came and all of a sudden we were overtaken by the cloud. We couldn't see. It was hard to breathe. You were scared of what's in the cloud. All of a sudden we were like, have they contaminated us? Is it also, your mind wasn't working very clearly. And that's the first time that I really felt like I might not make it through this. Before my flight was taken in and I was getting off and getting out and we were going to be fine. But that was the scariest moment for me personally. We tried to take shelter at a restaurant that's in that same area. Everybody in Battery Park tried to get into that restaurant, and the restaurant people shut the doors and would not let us in. There were awnings, so we were able to get under the awning and try and get our wits about us. It was at that point where I was approached by a woman who said, "Please, will you help me? I'm pregnant. I have asthma. I see you have water. Could I please have a drink of your water and some tissue?" And because we all had a little piece of tissue over our face at the time. And I had a reaction that I'm not proud of. I looked over at her and I thought, this is a homeless person trying to get my water. Horrible reaction, not proud of it. But I think, again, it just tells us what happens during these times. And then I looked at her a little more closely. And first of all, she was a homeless person. Today, I still would have helped her. I'm a much different person. But at the time, who knows? But anyway, it's an awful thing to say. But I looked at her more closely and I realized that she had a suit on and she was carrying a briefcase very close to the kind I carried. And then I looked over at my colleagues to see what I should do if we wanted to help her. And I realized my colleagues looked the exact same way she did. We were all covered in that ash and we all looked like 70-year-old homeless people. So clearly we helped her, we helped each other. And again, just realized what dire danger we were in. I will tell you that it was at this point that we heard our first jets, United States of America jets, fly over Manhattan. And that was another very scary moment because everybody, again, was just so disoriented and scared and concerned. And when we heard the jets, everybody took cover and, crunched down again in fear. And then you started to hear people go, "Hey, don't worry, it's us. It's us. we're going to be okay." And it was a really good moment of okay, there's some sort of sanity here and we might again get through this. It was also at that time where, again, we started talking about the ferries and we've got to get to the ferries. And the interesting thing is the smoke was going toward the Hudson River. So the ash had stopped falling, but the smoke was just still there. And the smoke was right toward the ferries. And so it was scary because we're like, well, to get to the ferries, we got to run through the smoke. We can't see. We don't know how far it is. But we decided we just had to do it. And this is where my faith comes in. It was an amazing moment because, as again, we were trying to decide, do we do it? Do we have the courage to go through that smoke? A big gust of wind came and blew that smoke cloud aside, and we could see the ferries at the railing. And so we made our way over to the ferries. You can go to the next one. I know that we for sure were on one of the very first ferries that went. I've tried to look it up to see what ferry, but one of the stories I just found, I have like an undaunted like need to get as much information still on these events and piece it together. But what they talk about is that the ferry drivers made the decision to turn around and go back before the ferry companies said to do it. And they couldn't go to their normal place to board. So they were coming up right along the railing. And literally our ferry did that. They pulled up against the railing and then people were just hopping over to get on. And it was mayhem. Everyone was trying to jump on them. But the ferry drivers were so calm and in charge. And they said, look, we will keep coming back until everyone's off this island. So please, everyone, just be patient, be calm. Don't put the ferry in danger. We can take as many, as safe, and we'll be back. And so we were one of the first to get on. They literally hoisted us over the railings to get on the ferry. And again, they shouted out with a megaphone, we'll be back, but we're going to take this load first. And we headed off. And we were, I don't know, maybe 100 feet away from Battery Park and that ferry rail when the second tower collapsed. You can kind of see the timeline of events and how quickly all of this was happening. It was pretty scary on the ferry when the second tower collapsed because now it was an earthquake in the water. The water just tore up and got real wavy. And like I said, I'm scared to death of the water. We were all putting on life jackets and thought, my gosh, this thing could turn over or people could panic and act crazy. Thankfully, everyone did keep a calm head and those ferry drivers just kept talking to us all the way. So we got across, and again, it was amazing because it was such a beautiful day in Manhattan. And as we were going toward New Jersey, it was the most beautiful blue sky. We crossed the Statue of Liberty, and yet as you turned around and looked at Lower Manhattan, it was just devastating. So it was just such a juxtaposition of two completely different visuals. If you go to the next bullet, this is where I actually don't know that I'm right anymore. We all thought we got dropped off in Hoboken, but we're not sure of that anymore by other accounts. But we got dropped off somewhere in New Jersey. And as soon as we got there, people were there, responders were there, and they wanted us to go to the Red Cross. And our group immediately said, no way, we're not going to Red Cross. We're going to figure out how to get home. So we just started walking. And at first we found a truck, a guy in a pickup truck who was willing to drive us to Somerset, New Jersey, where our rental cars were. But as we were making a deal on one side, he was taking a deal on another, and literally people jumped in, paid more cash, and took the truck away from us, which probably worked out fine because it was a pickup truck, and there were 8 of us by now. The 9th had gone on his own way back to Connecticut. He was our speaker. And so then we happened to find a guy in a big, like a minibus, that they use to take you to the rental car place at the airport. As we kept walking, we came upon him in a Home Depot parking lot. He was sitting there videoing Lower Manhattan from the view. And we had collected our money by then to see how much cash we had on hand. And he only spoke Spanish, and one of our guys could speak Spanish, so he negotiated a deal with that guy to drive us, which was amazing. And he did, and we got in the van and we were able to charge our phones. All of us were able to, by then, to connect with family, to get messages across. And so we were able to get to Somerset, New Jersey in record time. It's pretty amazing. We were there, I know, between 12 and 1 by the time we walked into the hotel. When we walked in, the front desk had the news on, and we said, you know, we're here to get rental cars. And they said, we're all sold out. And we said, well, we have a reservation. And they're like, no, all of our you know, the only reservations we have are for a group that's coming in from Manhattan. And we're like, we're the group. And they were like, you got to be kidding. There's no way you got out of there in that time. And so they were amazed to see us, because all the other rental cars had been taken by people from the hotel itself who were going, which is another whole story about the displacement of rental cars those days. So we were able to get our cars. We had rented 3. We turned 1 back in and huddled in together. Our group was, several of us were from Tampa, and one was from Dallas, Texas, one was from Kansas City, and one was from Utah. So together we went for as long as we could, and then we divvied up as one car went west. But as soon as we got in the car, we went to the bank. We had been wired money. We were able to get cash because we'd given all of our cash to the guy that drove us down to New Jersey, which I will forever be grateful to him, because as we were going south, the traffic going north was horrendous. And I can only imagine what his ride home was like. And I'll tell you, he only took a couple $100, so it wasn't even that much. So I'll be forever grateful to him. We then went to like a 7-Eleven and bought provisions, got lunch, and then started making our way. We decided to take back roads only, and because we didn't know what else was going to happen. And we had heard Chicago had been hit. We heard San Francisco had been hit. We didn't know about the Pentagon or Shanksville yet. We were just hearing rumors, but we still felt like we're under attack. What are we going to do? So we started taking back roads. The interesting thing enough, the back road that we took, we ended up stopping at a small town Walmart that was very close to Shanksville. So that was kind of bizarre. But we walked into Walmart and we bought items like, you know, sleeping bags and pillows and things to be on the road for longer than we thought we might. You know, we didn't still know what we were headed into. The people at Walmart were amazing, just crazy. Another funny line.
Oh, we lost her. I imagine she's going to try and get back on. I don't have my phone. Let me go get my phone and text her to let her know that we lost her, just in case she doesn't know.
See me?
Hi, Matt.
Hey, I could hear and see all of you the whole time, but I couldn't see myself. So
Oh, yes, I can see you. Oh, I can't hear you, Renee.
I'm not talking.
Renee, not you.
Hi, Mac.
Hi, I could see. I was here the whole time. I could see
I know,
everything.
I saw when you came on.
I was like, I can't see myself, so I don't think they can see me. But then I finally figured out how to turn my camera back on.
Yeah, well, we lost our speaker. Oh, there she is. Okay, she's coming back on.
Okay.
I just got a text from her saying her computer went dead,
Those darn batteries.
but she,
Okay, guys, I'm back. Can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
I don't know what happened. My computer just died, but thankfully I had a backup one sitting here that I was cracking my slides. So phew, thank God for backups. So I was about to tell you one of the other funnies. When we went into that Walmart, it was a super Walmart. And one of the guys in the group said, we've made it this far. This is the place where I'm scared we're going to lose each other. So we kind of laughed about that. But we got through that Walmart. And then the rest of the timeline is the last bullet here is that it was about 24 hours later that we made it home to Tampa. I think that timing is on there, Audrey, if you hit the bullet. And then that colleagues, it took about another 24 hours for our last member of our team who was in Salt Lake City, Utah, to get home. So we stayed in close touch with each other throughout. So it was pretty crazy. So I'll pause now for questions, and if you want to go to the next slide, Audrey, there's a visual, I think. Now I've lost my cheater slide, but I think the next is a visual of everything I've just talked about.
It's the aerial view of Lower Manhattan.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I can see it. I just can't see what slides are next, so I'm going to have to sift my way through this with you.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is, I like to show this slide because it gives context to what I'm talking about. And it explains all of the dark gray and red represents the buildings that were completely demolished. The blue, severely damaged, yellow, some damage, and then white are affected by the whole smoke and area. And I know Audrey had a niece that lived down in that area at the time. I mean, the effects were really broad. Even for the buildings that weren't damaged, the after effect is, and as we're all still hearing about on the media, the after effects are still happening. So, any questions for me so far? I can't see the chat, so I don't know if anyone's asked any questions in the chat.
And the chat has disappeared, so I can't see it either.
Okay.
So
if anyone has any questions?
turn on your microphone if you have a question. Okay.
All right. So the next slide are a couple just visuals of the, I tried to find one that shows the smoke and what I also like that this represents is all the ferries coming in. And if you go to the next slide, it's a picture of our group and the bus that I talked about. We have a couple of pictures from us. I think what's amazing is that we all cleaned off so quickly. It's kind of bizarre that you look there, and again, that's why I think the people at the hotel didn't believe us that we were from Manhattan. But that's our bus and our team. And then if you go to the next picture, I think I have a group shot. I do. That's all of us together, which I just found this picture recently in all my stuff. I have boxes and files of memorabilia, and I just found this one when I was getting ready to go speak last fall. And then the next picture is part of my recovery. So I was a little leery to travel again, as you can imagine. I did go back to New York that holiday season. I went back up for a business meeting. And that's when I started writing down my story because I so love New York and I just knew I needed to return. So I did go back to New York. I said that I would never leave the country on September 11th. And interestingly enough, 2 years later, we had gotten the call that our daughter was ready to be adopted in China, and she was placed in our arms on September 10th. And on September 11th, we were in a Walmart supercenter in Changsha, China. So I thought that was kind of ironic that that's where we were 2 years later. On the 10th anniversary of 9/11, if you go to the next slide, I had not been back down to the financial district. That's the one thing I didn't do. When I went back to New York, I always stayed back where I like to stay in Midtown. I never had any reason to go back to the financial district. Business never took me there. And on the 10th anniversary, there was all this talk about, do you go? They were having a big memorial and everyone was thinking about it, considering it. And I said, no, I'm just not ready. And interestingly enough, I kept getting invites for things, and I got invited to a World Diversity Conference, and it took place that week. We had a really cool event at the stock market, and we were right down in Battery Park. And I was with one of my colleagues, and she said, do you want to go and see it? Do you want to walk the path? Do you want to do anything? And so I said, sure, let's just see how it goes. I still have never been to the memorial. I will someday. I just can't bring myself to go there because, again, I like to visit New York City and have a good memory of it. And I just know if I go to that, that'd be what I would do, is just probably go to that. But anyway, we did walk into the hotel, and as soon as we walked in, it was beautiful. His name is right now escaping me. Darn it. It'll come to me. But I walked in, and this gentleman was standing at the bell desk, and he looked at me and he said, welcome, Pilgrim. It was really powerful. Sorry. But anyway, I said, what do you mean? And he goes, you were here. I just know you were here. And we shared a little story together. Gosh, I'm sorry, I got emotional. But anyway, he was there that day. He's Muslim. he walked out and got in a taxi and went home and didn't go back to the Marriott for 3 months. And the Marriott welcomed him back when he came back, and he's worked there ever since. The Marriott shut down for several months to house first responders and people taking care of the cleanup. So it wasn't open anyway, and they were very good to their employees. There's a little plaque on the wall. They've completely remodeled. Our conference room is still there. It looks a lot different, but it was still in the same area, so it was good to go see that. And then I rewalked the steps down to Battery Park. So that's where I was 10 years later. And then, like I already said at the beginning of the story, I guess, how many years later was that? 17 years later, I was in India on September 11th. And these were all my Deloitte colleagues at the time in India that I was with. I shared my story with them that day in honor of 9/11, and they cried with me because I seem to always crack at one point of the story. So, it was very interesting to be in India that day. And what I've learned, I've shared this story in Amsterdam, in India, in Paris. What I've learned is how everyone was impacted. And I used to think that this was just an American event. So that's another thing I've learned and taken with me as I've shared this story, and everyone around the world will tell you where they were, how it impacted them, and what they think of it still today. So it's pretty crazy. So I think that's the wrap. The last thing I have is a video to share, which I came across a couple of years ago that I absolutely love. And it's about the evacuation that took place at Battery Park, called The Boat Lift. And it's all about the ferries and everybody else who came out to get people off the island and back home to safety.
Yeah, I hope this is that you'll be able to see this. I checked this out yesterday, and I think you will. Can you see it? Do you see the?
Not yet.
Not yet, just the title.
What if you control click on it?
Are you seeing it?
No. No, it's not playing, Audrey.
Okay. Good.
Well, it could be a follow-up piece if it doesn't work. I'd highly
Okay. Well, excuse me. I sent everyone the slides today, so you should have these slides where I've usually been putting the slides. I put these slides, so you've got the hyperlink and you can watch the video because it is really good. So let me go back, see if I can get. Get rid of that. Let me again ask, I'm gonna, nope, I don't want to leave the meeting. Does anyone have any questions for Heather?
Heather, how does this event shape your succession planning for not only for your clients but also for your company?
My succession planning?
Yeah.
It's a good question. Well, I mean, I am just innately driven to that still of always having a backup plan tomorrow is promised to nobody. So not one single person is ever irreplaceable. I mean, you've got to have a plan. I personally have not been involved in formal succession planning in any organization I've been part of yet. But as I've led my own teams and functions, I've made sure I have a second who's empowered to make choices if anything happens to me. And again, that we've got good data, we've got notes, we've got client information so that our company can stay functioning in case something like this happens. And again, that's gone into effect even again, what we're dealing with right now is how do you keep business running? How do you keep, I'm a big believer and we've got to do our part for the economy and that life has to go on. And that at the same time, I have a huge empathy for people and what they're going through. So I believe everybody has to do what they need to do to take care of themselves first. And the business has to have a plan to take care of the business so that business goes on too. So. That's a good question. I've never been asked that before.
Mac, I see your microphone is hot. Do you have a question?
No, I've just taking it all in.
Sarah?
I don't have a question, but I do want to thank you for sharing your story. It was really moving. And I remember on 9/11, 2001, it was my 1-year anniversary at the company that I work for.
Oh, wow.
And we were all just praying for everyone involved, and hearing your story and kind of what someone actually was going through is kind of choking me up even a little bit, because we didn't know. We were just praying, watching TV,
Right.
to hear what really was going on and all the things you had to go through. It's really a big deal. So thank you.
Well, thank you for saying that, because it is one of the reasons why I share it now. You know, it's kind of like they say you want to hear from the veterans of World War II still in Vietnam, and the first witnesses to an event are, I think, have a duty to share that. It took me a long time. I used to sit and, you know, you go out to group dinners and things for business, and it's interesting because in the days that followed 9/11, for years, it would come up every time of, you know, where were you? And people would start telling their stories. And for many years, I sat silent and didn't say it because I couldn't get through it, and my heart would race, and I just let everybody else tell their story because everybody has a story. And the first time I finally opened up and saw the reaction from the group and got all the questions that I got, I thought, okay, maybe I can start healing by sharing it. So it was about probably, I think it was the 5th year anniversary that I did my first official talk on it. So thanks for saying that.
Well, Heather, I thank you so much for taking the time and for your adaptability doing this virtually, because we had no idea when we set this up that what we were going to be facing. So I really appreciate your time. So thank you so much. And if any other questions come up during the rest of this evening, I will certainly forward them to you so we can get the answers for everyone.
Okay. Thank you all for letting me join you this evening, and take care of yourselves.
Thanks.
Thank you,
The
Kat.
food shall pass. We will get through it.
Yes.
We will. Thanks, Ketch.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, so we are supposed to do another 3 hours tonight. I honestly have no idea how we're going to do another 3 hours. My thought is right now, let's take a quick, walk away break, use the restroom. Well, don't shut anything off. We'll leave everything on. Just come back, and we'll go through some stuff. I'll go for as long as it seems prudent to keep the class going. My intent was not to take full break so that at least we finish by 9:30, 9:15. I think going 4 hours is going to be a little much. And it does look like that we're not going to get back to the classroom, because this is going through April 3rd, that all campus classes are going to be online, and we finish the 28th, 29th, something like that. The 30th is supposed to be our last